the street right in front of my house. So I'm the weirdo that walked out there
Coffee.
with my coffee. Actually, I delay my coffee. It was with my water in the morning. I'll talk about why I delay coffee. And I'm leaning against a tree. I confess I was text messaging it for part of that.
Yeah.
Forgive me, I'm human. And catching the sunlight coming in through my eyes for a few minutes, I allow myself to blink. Obviously, I'm not.
So you won't look directly at the sun.
You don't want to look directly. There's a safety.
I guess if it's a lower horizon,
it's not that intense.
Yeah.
We have a built-in safety mechanism, which is if you need to blink and close your eyes, close your eyes.
Yeah.
But I got sunlight in my eyes. I get the weird looks from my neighbors, but they know me, and they do it too. Sometimes they'll join me.
Yeah.
Animals will naturally do this. They'll migrate to the sun. So then I go inside. It's 10 minutes or so. It seems like a long time, but it is so beneficial. And then inside, if I want to be awake, I try and turn on as many bright lights as I can. One of the big mistakes that we've made in the last few years as a culture is assuming that blue light is bad. During the day, lots of blue light is great because that's the best signal for these cells that wake up your system. It activates all sorts of important hormone pathways and wakefulness pathways.
Interesting.
It can reduce brain fog in some sense.
Sure.
It's in the evening that you want to avoid blue lights and bright lights of any kind. We can talk about that. But so then I come back inside, and then I do not drink caffeine right away. It's important in many ways to delay caffeine enough so that you can clear out some of the chemical signals in the brain and body that lead to a feeling of fatigue. So the longer you're awake, the more a molecule called adenosine builds up in your system. And when you sleep, you push that adenosine level back down. When you wake up in the morning, that adenosine level can be 0, but oftentimes there's still some hanging around. Caffeine is an adenosine antagonist. It blocks adenosine function. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's effectively what it does. So if you wake up and you've got, let's say 20%, let's make, this is arbitrary, but 20% of your adenosine still hasn't been cleared out, that's sort of a drowsiness that you woke up with. Then you go and you drink your coffee and you crush that ability of adenosine to have that effect, but it hasn't gone away. So that when your coffee wears off mid-morning, now that adenosine is there and you feel like there's a mid-morning crash or an afternoon crash. So I delay my caffeine intake for about 90 and ideally 120 minutes after I wake up. Because in that way you bring your adenosine level down very, very low to 0, and then you don't get this rebound crash in the afternoon. For years I would get this post-lunch crash. And I thought maybe I'm eating too much for lunch, which I probably was, or maybe I'm eating the wrong foods. Turned out it was all related to my timing of caffeine. So, and your system learns how to wake up naturally.
Right.
You get the natural cortisol and adrenaline release.
Give it the time. Yeah.
Give it the time. And people hate this one because it's a little painful for the caffeine addicts, but I'm a pretty serious caffeine addict and I embrace that. And I'll tell you, it also makes the joy of the coffee so much greater.
You're like waiting for that, you're savoring it, like, my first sip.
It tastes so much better. And that relates to the dopamine system, which I know we're going to talk about later. I sometimes will drink yerba mate instead of...
Yeah, I love mate.
Mate has a couple...
Do you put honey in it or anything?
I don't.
Sweet stevia or something?
I don't really like sweet stuff too much.
Man, I wish I had that disease.
Yeah, it's...
I wish I had
I like
that.
savory things and salty things. I like yerba mate for a number of reasons. I don't like the really smoky mates. And my dad's Argentine, so I grew up drinking mate. But
you don't speak Spanish, though, do you?
I speak 4 words of Spanish, and those I speak poorly. So
is your dad fluent?
He's fluent.
Come on.
I know. Parents who are...
How do you... That's a crime, isn't it?
It's a crime. Well, it's not a crime I committed. I love my
That's
dad.
your dad committed, yeah.
Well, bilingual parents, please encourage your children to learn multiple languages. Musicians, parents.
Teach your kids the instrument.
Yeah, have you ever seen the people who play guitar in college? Let's just say their lives are better than everyone else's.
What are the benefits, as a side point here, talking about mate, what are the benefits of learning 2 languages in early childhood development over only learning one?
Well, probably multiple benefits, in addition to the practical benefits in life and jobs and opportunities that come with
relationships.
Absolutely. And there's and relationship opportunities. If you're ever with someone, I was in a relationship for several years with somebody who was from France and spoke French.
Wow.
And I eventually picked up some French and I could understand, but I could never really understand the subtlety of the humor. And so there was a lot that we couldn't share, unfortunately. So there are multiple reasons to do that. I mean, many reasons to learn languages. But from a brain perspective, I mean, you've got this as we say, neural architecture, these areas of the brain that are devoted to language, primarily on the left side, but there's functionality on both sides. And those areas are like a template for whatever language you're exposed to. You can pack a lot more into that neural real estate if you learn multiple languages, and that affords you a flexibility at better language learning for new languages. So, the languages that are Latin-based, so you could learn French as a child and speak English, and then find it easier to speak Italian, or learn Italian, find it easier to learn French. Just like if you learn how to play the oboe as a child, the guitar is actually going to be easier for you just because of the neural circuits for understanding scales and pitch and these kinds of things. I'm talking about a musician. Yeah. Those are there. So I think there's a tremendous utility to it.
Okay.
But the mate is for the caffeine. The mate also tends to be, it's never a pleasant topic, but it's somewhat of a laxative, which I think keeping digestion, flushing your system. And it contains something called glucagon-like peptide 1, GLP-1. GLP-1 is something you're going to hear a lot more about in the years to come. It's actually now in clinical trials for the treatment of diabetes and obesity. It enhances lipolysis, the conversion of fat into energy. And it's just a...
So how, does that mean helps you burn fat?
Helps you burn fat. Helps you... We should be careful because sometimes this gets tricky. It helps you utilize fat as an energy source.
And not needing a sugar.
Right. Whether or not you visibly lose fat or not will depend on whether or not you deficit. Right. But it helps shuttle the direct metabolism, let's say, toward using fat stores as energy resource, which is very good, and it also has some indirect effects on blood sugar regulation through the insulin management pathway.
And mate is caffeinated?
Oftentimes it's caffeine, and oftentimes it can be very high caffeine. The one that I like...
I thought you said no caffeine until 90 minutes after, right?
Right, so I'm not touching mate until 90 minutes after. Because we were talking about coffee. Sometimes I'm drinking coffee, sometimes I'm drinking mate.
Gotcha.
And if I'm really going for it, I really have this...
Doing both.
I like to see the mate and the coffee. And I like to just sip one, then the other. Mate is kind of nice too because it contains electrolytes, so it's not as depleting.
Dehydrating?
Yeah, well, your neurons run on sodium, magnesium, and potassium. That's how neurons fire. Sodium ions rush into the cell. If you're low in sodium or you're dehydrated, your brain isn't going to work as well. So caffeine in the form of coffee is great, but you should probably drink 2 volumes of water for every 1 volume of coffee you drink in order to hydrate. And a lot of people feel jittery when they drink caffeine, or they feel lightheaded, or they suddenly get hungry. Oftentimes that's because there's sodium. I think 2022, I think we're also going to hear a lot about the value of salt. Salt is an essential nutrient. Obviously, people with hypertension should not be consuming salt, but there's a lot of good science now to support the fact that if you're feeling lightheaded or you feel like you have quote-unquote low blood sugar, oftentimes taking a little pinch of salt, putting in some water and cooking that, to adjust the taste. All of a sudden, shaking stabilizes, you feel more alert. Why? Because salt and water have an interesting relationship. It increases blood volume and oftentimes blood flow to the brain simply by increasing your sodium intake. And so I think
mate's got a lot of those ingredients.
Mate has electrolytes. It doesn't have salt. But I would say for anyone that's thinking about their morning routine and brain fog, there's no reason why in your morning water you might just put a little tiny pinch of salt. And if you're drinking a lot of coffee in any form, or caffeine in any form, I should say, then you want to be sure to get sodium. And you'll notice that if you drink a lot of caffeine, that you'll crave sodium. And this has a whole relationship in the kidney and aldosterone, and we don't have time to get into it, but I always make sure that if I'm drinking water before or with my caffeine, that I try and put a little bit of salt in.
Got it. Okay.
And there are a lot of supplement companies now spinning up. We don't have to throw out brands that are selling salt solution. This is becoming big.
Big.
Yeah.
Okay. So water, bright light, no caffeine until 90 to 20 minutes. What's next?
Water with salt. Okay. And
Water with
then
salt.
it's a question of whether or not